There's an important stat that says the Pelicans could make the conference finals, but should we trust it? We're doing a deep dive into lineups in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Thursday. The Pelicans jumped up after the victory over the Toronto Raptors the other night into a good spot to be. I'll explain what that stat is, but should we trust it? But it's eye-opening. And then we'll get into a little bit of Zion in the dunk contest and some other things in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Kendrick Perkins says not enough people are talking about the Pels. We talk about them every single day here with bonus episodes as well. So subscribe and on YouTube, become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Tell a friend about the show too. So today we're going to lead off with a statistic that I find really important. There's a couple of statistics that I use when evaluating the team to kind of get an idea of kind of where they stand in the landscape of the NBA. And spoiler alert, the Pelicans just jumped into the top 4 of one of them, and that's a real good spot to be. So quickly, I talk a lot about offensive rating, defensive rating. That is points scored per 100 possessions. It is different than points scored per game. If you have a slower pace, it means fewer chances to score, so you might not score a ton of points. But if you play with a slower pace, your opponent then has to also play with a slower pace. Because if you have a possession, then they get one. If you get one, they get one. Teams end up with basically the same amount of possessions per game. If you play with more possessions, higher pace, you have more chances to score higher points per game, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a better offense. So offensive rating, and then the inverse of that, of course, is defensive rating, is really important to look at. And then net rating, the stat we're going to look at today, is your offensive rating minus your defensive rating. This kind of gives you an idea of just how good a team is. And when you look back at basically every NBA champion since they started keeping track of these statistics in like the 80s, 6 or better is the number that you want to be at if you want to be even considered to make the finals, to win the NBA finals and be NBA champion. You basically need that to be your number. So net rating is very important. Right now, after their win over the Toronto Raptors, the Pelicans are fourth in net rating. Remember I said 6 is the magic number? They're at 5.4. The only teams better than them are the Boston Celtics, who have a net rating of 11.3, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have a net rating of 7.6, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have a net rating of 6.6, then it's the Pelicans at 5.4, and then rounding out the top 5 is the Cleveland Cavaliers at 4.9. This is really good company to be in, but, and we'll get into this more in a little bit here in a minute, do we trust this statistic fully? And the answer is actually no. And if we don't trust it fully, and that's okay, the way I want to look at it from actually means it's better than you think. So if you can believe that, it's actually better than you think. So yeah, we don't want to trust this necessarily, but it's actually better than you think. We're looking at it from that perspective. That's a good thing to be in here. But first, the net rating and all of that, right? Usually when you're looking at conference finalists, and the way I look at teams that you would call a contender are you a conference finalist? Are you one of the final 4 teams left in the NBA? Do I think you could conceivably, realistically get to a conference finals? Not necessarily win it, but if you get there, like you're a contender, you're one series win away from making the NBA finals. That number, to kind of be a conference finalist, is usually a net rating of 5 or more. Jumps up a little bit for the NBA finals being 6 or more. So the Pelicans are in good company here. When you look at the Boston Celtics, right, they've been the best team by far, I think, all season long. The Thunder and Timberwolves have been as consistent as possible. One is 43-19, the other is 42-19. These are very good teams that have kind of proven it over the course of the season. And the Pelicans' net rating is right in the mix with that team. The Pelicans have a better net rating than the Clippers, the Bucks, the Nuggets, the Knicks, the Suns, some of these other really good teams that we think about. So this number I do think is telling. Now, and we'll get into this more in the next segment here, it's also sometimes a bit of a mirage. There's two mirages here. It's actually better than you think. But the other one is, when you look at those other teams ahead of the Pelicans, it's their starting units that are bolstering them up. One of the things, look, we'll use Kendrick Perkins as an example of this, saying like, this team has a lot of depth. Yeah, the depth is important, and we'll go into that a little bit more in the show. But your starters are the group that needs to carry you for the most part. Your bench isn't winning you an NBA title. Jokic won an NBA title for, the Nuggets last year, right? They had key role players, but it's your starting unit. Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, right? Bruce Brown. Those type of guys are kind of the key to your teams. You might have a key guy off the bench, certainly, but that's not the reason you're going to win the NBA Finals or even make a conference finals, right? It's your starters that need to carry you. And for the Pelicans, for the most part this season, that hasn't been the case, right? The starters on the year have a negative net rating of negative 1.1 on the season. It's not great. Park that number for a second because we're going to touch on that next, because that's another part of the mirage here, right? And why actually looking at the net rating for this team maybe says something really good about them. So it's the Pelicans bench that's been beating up on some of these, bad lineups that opponents throw out there to kind of make up for the lack of work that the starters are doing. Okay. That I don't think is as big of an advantage in the playoffs. It's an advantage. We'll talk more about it, but I don't think it's the biggest thing, and that's not what's going to win you the NBA championship. So if you look at it from that perspective, this number right here is kind of fake. Yeah, fourth best net rating, but when it's your 10th, your 9th guys off the bench that are doing that, I don't know if that's actually going to help you in the postseason. If you're going to go in looking pretty good, feeling good about the statistics, the numbers, and then you're going to get bounced out in the first round and you're going to feel kind of bad about it and be like, what the heck happened? So it's setting some expectations with that. But look, the Pelicans are top 10 in offense, top 10 in defense, particularly after that win. And this is bolstered a little bit by two dominant wins over the Pacers and the Toronto Raptors. But right now, the Pelicans are up to 8th in offense in terms of offensive rating. Defensively, they're 6th. And then that gives them the 4th best net rating. Again, being above a 5 on net rating is a really, really good situation to be in. And I'm very happy with this. They keep going like this. They are a solid playoff team, likely the 5th seed at this point. And I'm thrilled about that. I think you would be thrilled about that as well, with maybe a bit of an outside shot to catch the Clippers for 4. Actually, on Locked On NBA, which I told you to listen to today, we did talk about it on there. Got a good bit of Pelicans talk in on the national show. See, Perk, people are talking about him. So let's look at the other kind of flip side of this, the other mirage with this, why actually that 5.4 positive net rating doesn't tell the whole story in a good way for the Pelicans. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue, perfect for city drives and great escapes. With class-exclusive Google built in, it's your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, Google Play Store are all built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. There's also the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder, has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. So take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, the Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this team, looking at how the offense impacts the defense, all of those things that we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks on the show. And you're seeing it kind of come to fruition out there on the court. That's why you tune into the podcast here. So subscribe. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Almost 10,000 of y'all on YouTube as well. Comment down below on YouTube. Do you think that the net rating means the Pelicans could make a conference finals? Do you think they're still missing a piece? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. So that's what we're talking about. We're looking at a statistic here that I think is really important, because when you look at the history of the NBA, if you don't meet this sort of benchmark, 5 or better, you're not really ever going to be in the conversation to be a contender, and teams just don't go that far. This is a pretty telling statistic that has a lot of just like factual evidence behind it. 6 is the number you want to be for to be considered like a title winning team. Higher than that is also a good thing. Now, just because you're 5 or better, 6 or better, doesn't mean you'll make it that far. But this is a characteristic that kind of all of those teams do share, as well as getting as close as possible to being in the top 10 on offense and the top 10 on defense, something the Pelicans are currently doing. So this is a really good position for this team to be in. But is it a mirage, right? You know, the starters have a negative net rating of 1.1. You need to rely on your starters in the postseason, and if that's not getting it done, I don't know if that net rating is necessarily as telling as we'd like it to be. But here's the thing, that negative 1.1 for the starting lineup here for the Pelicans is over the course of the whole season, right? So the Pelicans starting lineup of, where did my numbers just go? Well, we know what the starting lineup is. CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, Jonas Valanciunas, right? You know, that's the group here that is at times struggling. But here's the thing. Since, as I said, it's over the course of the whole season. Let's filter out the beginning period of time where New Orleans was still really trying to figure some things out, kind of integrating Zion back in. Zion wasn't playing the best version of basketball. Brandon Ingram had some struggles too. CJ McCollum was out of the lineup, which kind of messed with things too. What about the starters since January 1? What's their net rating, right? Well, their net rating since January 1 is positive 6.5, 6.5. So yes, we can look at the starters having a negative net rating saying like that's going to be a problem. But again, that's over the course of the season. If you're kind of in the more what have you done recently mindset, and I think that's maybe a safe thing to kind of look at. Since January 1, it's a bit of an arbitrary date on this, they are positive 6.5. That's a really good number. And if you look at the Pelicans as a whole with their net rating since January 1, let me pull that number up here. It's going to surprise you. They actually have the third best net rating during that time. We said before it was positive 5.4, but since January 1, it's positive 7.8. Their third best net rating. It's above teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves, above the Thunder, right? Above the Clippers, who played some really great basketball after the James Harden trade. You know, it's not in the realm of the Boston Celtics, who are plus 12.3, or the Cleveland Cavaliers, 10.3. But you're the best of the Western Conference during this period of time since January 1. The Pelicans are 18-11 during that stretch. By all accounts, as they've started to figure things out, like this is a good team. So the starters having a positive net rating since January 1, maybe filtering some of those early season struggles as they kind of have seemingly pieced things together a little bit more, I think that's a reason for a lot of optimism right now, wouldn't you say? Right? That's better than, if you look at the Pelicans in their starting unit at positive 6.5, that's better than the Clippers starting unit. It's better than Boston's starting unit. Think about that one for a second. Better than OKC. That lineup trails Minnesota, but that's where your depth really then starts to come through and just adds a little bit to it, right? You have a better overall team net rating than Minnesota does. So as Minnesota gets a little bit deeper into their bench, they start to fall off more. And when the Pelicans start to get into their bench, once the starters are starting to rotate guys in and out, you don't. There isn't as much of a fall off there. That makes you feel kind of good about your consistency from quarter to quarter, whether that's in a elimination game like the play-in tournament, hopefully not, or a game 7, right? Like that's what you're looking for here. So the starters, we can point to them being negative and be like, oh my goodness, this is a long-term worry. They've been good recently. They've been very good recently. And I think that's something that's worth pointing out, that, we can look at the whole thing, and I think that's important too. You want the largest sample size possible. But also, again, sometimes things just start to click. You put things together and you start doing better than other teams because of situations like that, right? Like, again, they have a better starting lineup net rating than the Clippers do. And I think that's really worth looking at. When you look at the Boston Celtics, same thing. So that's an important distinction here, that the Pelicans have been playing some really good basketball, I think, overall for the most part. So when we look at that net rating of whatever I said it was, positive 5.4, I think, fourth best in the league right now. Is it a mirage because the starters aren't getting it done? The starters weren't getting it done early on in the season. They're getting it done now. Now, this is also maybe boosted by these past 2 games against the Toronto Raptors and the Indiana Pacers, where the starters did come out hot. Let's see if they can kind of keep it up over some of these other games here. But overall, this is trending in the right direction. I'm not ready to say that the Pelicans are a conference finalist, but if they got there, I don't think it would hugely shock me. I would be surprised, but it wouldn't be wait, what? That happened, right? I don't think it's one of those things where we wouldn't be able to believe it whatsoever. Brandon Ingram plays some of his best basketball after the trade deadline. We're seeing Trey Murphy be back, right? Look at that 2-man game, and this is where the depth comes in, right? You can take out CJ McCollum, and that should hurt you. And it does. But you put in Trey Murphy, okay. You take out Herb Jones, you put in Trey Murphy, okay. You're missing a bit of a beat, but you're not missing a significant one, right? And that means you can keep kind of elevated good lineups around guys like Zion Williamson and make him better because of it. And so it just gives the Pelicans much more consistency. That's where your depth starts to shine, is around the stars rather than kind of a second unit line change. When you put Trey Murphy in for Herb Jones, okay, now what are defenses supposed to do? Right? It presents a problem, but not every team has something like that. So the Pelicans having this depth and having it been tested and proven at this point, I think is a really important thing for us to factor in when we're kind of trying to project where the Pelicans are going to go. Now, they haven't been as consistent as you'd like. You'd still like a couple more tweaks and changes. We saw in that game against the Toronto Raptors about having shooters and guys willing to take 3-pointers, right? Trey, if he gets in a slump again, you're going to need to rely on guys like CJ and Brandon Ingram to take more threes, something that BI has at times been reluctant to do. But if he plays that aggressive style of basketball, you can still make all of this work. So you're seeing things start to fall in place, and there's no reason to necessarily think that that starting lineup won't continue to keep getting better as time goes on. Now, we'll see how Jonas Valanciunas does in the postseason. It is a bit of a different animal. We'll see if Larry's capable of being out there on the court, giving them that kind of switchier center on the defensive side of the ball that they want, while still keeping up some rebounding, because them terminating possessions, ending opponents' possessions, is really, really important for them to be able to get out and score and then get back and then end more possessions. As I've been saying, these things are all interconnected like this. But don't just look at the starters being negative over the course of the whole season. Look at them being positive and very positive since January 1. If we kind of filter it in for number of minutes played and put a threshold of, say, 150 minutes played or more, where's their net rating kind of fall into lineups here? They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the 9th best lineup since January 1 with a minimum of 150 minutes. That's a good spot to be in, I think. So this team shows that there's a lot of potential here. Now, they trail Denver's starting lineup. They trail Phoenix's, Minnesota's too, when we kind of filter it in with all of that. But those are teams we kind of, in terms of talent, have above New Orleans. But it doesn't mean that this team is bad. It just means they're in the thick of competition for all of this. It's all we can really ask for, I think, from this team at this point. But the numbers, and even the eye test backs this up, right? They looked a little bit different these past couple of games, I think. And if it wasn't for that just disastrous of a first quarter against Indiana on the road, they could have won that game too. And we'd be looking at things even more differently right now. So we'll see if they keep it up. They're on this road trip right now with Eastern Conference teams. Get this win against the Philadelphia 76ers, get one on Sunday as well, and you can be in a very good situation here. By the way, there is a Pels 12 party at the Yacht Club on Sunday for the Hawks game. Gus Kattengale, Jim Eichenhofer will also be doing their radio show there. That comes from Rel, one of the founders of the Pels 12. So be there. I'm going to be out of town. Otherwise, I would be there hanging out with y'all. But those parties are fun. Go hang out with other Pelicans fans. I've heard Kendrick Perkins say, no one talks about this team. Everyone there is talking about the team and watching the game and having a good time, and you might be able to get on the radio yourself. So make sure you show up to the Mid-City Yacht Club for the Pels 12 watch party on Sunday. So coming up next, I put up the wrong graphic here today. I will fix that in editing on the show here. That's disappointing to see. So coming up next, let's talk about Zion Williamson in the dunk contest here. You're going to see a little bit of like movie magic maybe, or maybe won't even see it at all, and it'll look normal if you're watching on YouTube. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Game Time because I actually use Game Time all the time to get tickets to various things. It can be frustrating buying tickets, right? Like, are there hidden fees on things? Are you actually getting good seats? You can't really preview it ahead of time and all of those things. You know, it's just a hassle. It takes too many clicks. Buying tickets shouldn't be this hard. And that's why Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you the complete peace of mind with your purchase. You get to see the view from your seats before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. They have an all-in price, and it's shown up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. You can buy tickets in 2 taps, and with the Game Time guarantee, it means you're always going to get the best price. This is the best part. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Same section and row for less, and Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this team. We are talking Pelicans every single day, Kendrick Perkins, all year long. I rarely take breaks here. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Comment down below. And of course, become an everyday or listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. If you listen like 1 day a week, try listening 2 days a week, especially during the stretch run. 20 more games to go. It's going to be a sprint to the finish. The Pelicans, by the way, are in really good position. We just talked about the net rating and things. What I love about this, though, is they're getting some rest right now. They're getting some rest on this team. You know, they had a furious stretch of games right out of the NBA's All-Star break. And then they had 3 days off between the Pacers game and the Toronto Raptors game. They blew out Toronto, so guys didn't play really above 30 minutes in that game for the most part. Get even more rest, and then they get a couple of days off before this game Friday. I love it. Let these guys get rested, right? We were seeing Zion Williamson play all season long for the most part. I think he's on pace for 70 games right now. BI has been healthy. CJ has been healthy. All of that has been truly wonderful to see around this team, and I could not be more excited. More rest only means those guys should be healthier going forward. Avoiding letdowns, avoiding injuries, that type of stuff is truly important. You can make an argument that the revamped player performance and care team is the MVP of the season. Like, I really would argue that by just keeping guys healthy in a way that we haven't seen before with this franchise. That's a big deal. We'll talk more about that probably later in the season, into the offseason as well. One thing we're hoping to see next year is more Pelicans representation in the All-Star game. Didn't see Zion in there, didn't see Brandon Ingram in there. CJ, while playing really good, is probably like never going to be voted into the All-Star game. He's never been before. You could argue he's maybe the best player that hasn't been voted into an All-Star game. He'd joke and say, well, I'm being paid like an All-Star, so I'm sure he's okay overall, but probably would like to get in there. But of all the players, the most likely one to be in there is Zion Williamson with his popularity. But that has kind of waned in the past year or so. You know, he was up there last season because of fan voting, was voted in as a starter basically from fan voting, even though he was out injured and couldn't play. So disappointing to see, but I'd be willing to bet money I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that Zion Williamson will be an all-star next year. I'm going to call it right now when I'm recording this. I'm recording this on 3/5, by the way. So day before, like 2 days before the show's supposed to come out. Zion Williamson, I'm calling it on 3/5, will be an all-star next season. And that's because of something he said after the game against Toronto about whether he would participate in the dunk contest. And he goes, yeah, if I'm in the all-star game, I'll participate in the dunk contest. The dunk contest has had issues the past couple of years. 2 years ago, Trey Murphy III was robbed in the dunk contest. He should have won it. You'll never see him participate in that again. He was so upset about that. Jokingly, but also not jokingly. So it's been kind of on the downswing, right? Like the guy, Mac McClung, who's a great dunker, don't get me wrong, who's won it 2 years in a row, doesn't play in the NBA. Even if it's not like a big name NBA player winning the dunk contest, I think you still want the dunk contest winner in the NBA, right? Say Trey had won, people probably would have gone to see him play in games because he's a dunk contest winner. You can be like, oh, the Pelicans have the dunk contest winner. I want to go see them because that's cool. Like that's something that I do think is really important when it comes to the league. And so on Locked On NBA, other places where I've talked about like what do we do to kind of fix some of the All-Star game format, the dunk contest, those sorts of things. One of the things that has come up in discussions, just talking to other people, I don't want to call them like deep discussions or anything, right? Is, a lot of the events from All-Star Weekend need to have the All-Stars in it, right? They shouldn't just show up, play in the game, and leave. Maybe your dunk contest needs to be with 4 of the players on the All-Star team, right? Does the 3-point shootout need to have the players from the All-Star teams in it, right? The skills competition, those sorts of things. You need to have those All-Stars participating in more events, I think. So Zion Williamson saying like, yeah, if I'm voted in as an All-Star, I'll participate in the dunk contest, I think is a great idea. So one, absolutely means he's going to get voted in next year. He's going to make a team. Barring an injury, he's going to make a team because people will want to see that because everyone, for the most part, isn't as enamored with the dunk contest as they once were, and that's very disappointing. But star power of Zion Williamson in there, that's the type of thing that would get people really, really excited. I kind of love this move by him. This is what people have been talking about for the past day or so now. And this was just a great and wonderful thing to see. Make the All-Star game more fun, better, all of those things. And Zion Williamson can help do that. That's going to raise his profile again. Going to raise the profile of the All-Star game, kind of add a lot of excitement to it. Just boosts him overall. What a smart move to say something like that. I will tell you this. I'll make a guarantee here too, right? If I'm voted into the All-Star game, I will also participate in the dunk contest. If somehow I get voted in, I'll do it too. Doesn't hold the same weight when Zion says it. So very cool. Then hopefully we get to see him in the dunk contest next season. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. And I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.